If the key to success isn't IQ or luck, but the ability to read people as if they were open books, then you may be sitting on one of the most overlooked treasures of our time. Imagine this. You walk into a room full of strangers, and instead of feeling nervous or out of place, you sense the rhythm in every glance. You can tell who's truly in control, who's insecure, who's just waiting for someone to say something so they can open up. You don't need to overthink. You don't need to guess. You just know when to stay silent, when to speak, and exactly what to say. And you do it naturally, with depth, in a way that makes the other person feel truly seen, not just through eye contact, but through the power of your presence. That skill, I call it social intelligence. And if you've never studied it, developed it, or trained it every day, then chances are you're already behind more than you think. We are living in an unprecedented era, a world where everything can be optimized by algorithms, where smart machines can write essays, code software, even answer interviews. But amidst billions of bits of information, people are starving for connection. Because there's one thing no artificial intelligence has yet to replicate: the ability to truly feel another human being, to sense hesitation behind a sentence, to notice the fear hiding beneath a smile, and to respond, not with a script, but with presence, with humanity. We've never been taught how to listen deeply. We grew up in systems that glorified technical knowledge, IQ, test scores, and degrees. But when you step into the real world, you'll realize you can be the smartest person in the room and still be overlooked. You can be the hardest worker and still not be trusted. You can have the best ideas and still fail to move others to act with you. Why? Because you never learned to read people. You never understood that communication isn't about words, it's about what's not said. And it's what's not said that governs trust, emotion, and genuine connection. Let me be clear. Social intelligence is not the same as emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand yourself and manage your own emotions. It's an internal dialogue, but social intelligence is outward-facing. It's the ability to sense other people's emotions, motives, and intentions. Not just through words, but through eye movements, breathing rhythms, and silent pauses. It's the art of knowing when to lean in, when to step back, when to stay silent so as not to wound, and when to speak so you reach what truly matters. It's the reason why some people make others feel safe with just a look or a nod. Why can some say a single sentence and command attention, while others talk for hours and still go unheard? And the beautiful truth is, this ability is not innate. It's not a privilege reserved for a lucky few, it's a skill. And anyone, including you, can learn it, train it, and master it like a second nature. If you've ever felt misunderstood, overlooked in meetings, disconnected in relationships, if you've ever wondered, why can't I communicate better, connect more deeply, lead more effectively? The problem isn't that you lack capability. It's that you haven't seen the invisible rules that govern this whole social game. In the journey ahead, I'll walk with you to uncover all of that. Together, we'll decode the deeper principles of human connection, from building trust to navigating awkward silences in first meetings to handling tense conversations or even unspoken conflicts at work or in your own family. I'll help you read what others don't say, respond in ways that open them up, and most importantly, become someone others want to listen to, want to collaborate with, want to follow. You'll begin to see that in every interaction, there's an emotional ecosystem operating quietly underneath, and if you can read that map, you won't need luck to connect or persuade anyone ever again. What you're about to learn isn't surface-level communication tips or recycled advice. This is the path to unlocking the most influential version of yourself. A person who is perceptive, grounded, and capable of making others feel profoundly understood. And I mean this, once you begin to see the world through this lens, you won't be able to go back. Every conversation will become an opportunity to connect on a deeper level. Every handshake, glance, and silence will carry signals that you can detect and respond to with confidence, calm, and clarity. Think about this. What would happen if, from now on, you could walk into any conversation, whether with a boss, a client, a partner, or a stranger, and make them feel safe, valued, and trusted? What if you no longer had to second-guess yourself in conversations, no longer worried about saying the wrong thing, and instead embodied calm, presence, and inner power? What if you could read the world like a map and know exactly which path leads to real connection, to meaningful influence, to the most magnetic and powerful version of who you are? If even the smallest light just flickered in your heart, then stay with me, because everything you're about to learn won't just change how you communicate. It will change how you show up in this life. And I promise you, once you feel the power of that, you won't want to go back to the way things were. The transformation begins right now. Have you ever believed that success belongs to the smartest person in the room? That those with a high IQ, impressive academic records, or natural eloquence are the ones who effortlessly rise to the top of their careers? If you've ever believed that, you're not alone. But perhaps you've also witnessed so-called average people rising far beyond expectations. They don't need a stack of degrees, they don't have to be the most talented, and yet somehow they walk into a room and immediately draw attention. They create a sense of safety, trust, and closeness, and as a result, they win support, opportunities, and success. It doesn't start with IQ. It starts with the ability to see what others overlook. Emotions. The ability to read emotions, or more precisely, social intelligence, is not some vague concept. It is the art of understanding people without them needing to say a word. It's the capacity to step into a conversation and sense the atmosphere, the mood, the motives hiding behind spoken words. It's the ability to pick up on a flickering glance, a forced smile, a subtle shift in someone's breath. And above all, it's the sensitivity in how we respond. To build trust, foster connection, and influence with quiet strength. Not loud, not flashy, but profoundly powerful. You might call it a sixth social sense, but no, it's not some random gift that only a lucky few are born with. It's a skill. And like any skill, it can be learned, it can be trained, it can become a strength. Just like muscle is built through repeated workouts, social intelligence is cultivated through conversations, mindful moments, and those times when you stay quiet long enough to truly listen. Not just to words, but to what lies behind them. Modern neuroscience has proven that the human brain wasn't just designed to think, it was designed to connect. There are specific regions in our brains devoted to helping us understand the emotions of others. Mirror neurons, for instance, allow you to feel another person's pain simply by seeing their eyes drop. It's the same mechanism that makes you smile when someone else is happy, or fall quiet when you sense their loneliness. Social intelligence isn't just a nice to have. It's part of your biological structure. Something to be awakened, refined, and used with care. And yet the irony is this: while we spend decades learning how to read books, solve equations, and write reports, almost no one teaches us how to read people. No one tells you how to recognize disappointment behind a smile. No one trains you to handle emotional tension in a meeting or how to establish rapport within the first 5 minutes of meeting someone. The modern world teaches you to move faster, talk more, perform louder, but rarely teaches you the art of feeling. That's why so many people, despite being academically accomplished, feel disconnected in relationships. Why so many talented individuals hit ceilings, because they lack persuasion and empathy. Why so many dreamers fail to connect with those who could help make those dreams real. The absence of social intelligence doesn't lead to instant failure, but it quietly pulls you down, keeps you average, and leaves you feeling like you're always missing something without knowing what it is. The good news is, you don't have to live like that. Social intelligence isn't fate. It's a skill, and a skill can be learned starting today. You can learn how to read the energy in a room before saying something important. You can learn how to calm someone who's tense just through your grounded presence. You can learn how to form deep connections in short conversations, not by saying a lot, but by being genuinely perceptive. You can become the person others trust, turn to, and want to work with, not because you're the smartest, but because you understand people the most. And that is the one advantage no machine can replicate. In a world where technology can replace everything from manual labor to data analysis, the ability to connect and empathize remains the one thing machines will never do for you. Your ability to understand others will determine how much you're trusted, how many doors open for you, and whether you can create lasting influence or not. You might wonder, do I really need this skill if I'm an introvert? The answer is yes, even more so, because introverts often have a natural ability to observe, sense, and reflect deeply. These are the perfect building blocks for strong social intelligence. And if you're an extrovert, you need social intelligence just as much to ensure your presence isn't just loud, but meaningful and connected. I'm not telling you this to change your nature. I'm saying it so you can awaken the deepest part of yourself, the part you may have overlooked for years. When you learn to sense others, you begin to understand them. When you understand them, you influence them more deeply. And when you influence others with empathy, you don't need to force your way to stand out. Your energy alone will lead. In the next sections, I'll walk you through every corner of social intelligence, from how our brains process others' emotions to specific strategies for enhancing your presence, connection, and influence in any situation. But before we dive into techniques, remember this. This isn't a game to win. It's a journey to become the most effective and refined version of yourself. In every conversation, every relationship, and every time you step into the world, with a heart that can feel, a mind that's awake, and a presence that makes others want to stay. Have you ever wondered, in a world where technology is rapidly outpacing human capability in speed, accuracy, and data processing, what still makes human beings uniquely valuable? When machines can write essays, answer questions, analyze complex data, and even simulate emotions, what is it that makes you, a real human, truly irreplaceable? I ask you this not as a challenge, but to help us both face a reality. Technology is changing everything, except for one thing: the ability to create genuine human connection. Because, as you've seen, AI can reply to messages, offer solutions, and even play the role of a virtual friend. But it cannot truly feel the trembling in your voice when you're trying to sound strong. It cannot read the lost look in your eyes when you fall silent in a meeting. It cannot sense the contradiction between your words, "I'm fine," and the tightness in your chest that only someone deeply perceptive would notice. And that is what defines us as human: emotional intelligence. The ability to understand others on a level machines can never access. Emotional intelligence isn't just about understanding moods or having good manners. It's the ability to be present in a world where everyone is glued to their screens. It's the power to see another person, truly see them, beyond roles, titles, or the masks they wear. It's knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when someone needs advice and when they just need to be heard. It's an invisible skill, but one that shapes every relationship, every opportunity, and every turning point in your life. You might be thinking, is this really important in today's world? I know you've heard plenty about technology, big data, machine learning, and neural networks. I also know it can feel overwhelming, because if machines can do everything faster and more precisely, is there still a place for you? And I want to tell you this, from the heart. Emotional intelligence is the final frontier where humans can not only survive, but lead the game. Not by competing with machines, but by rising above them. And if you'll allow me, I want to ask you a gentle but honest question. Are you truly living in real connection, or are you interacting every day while still feeling lonely? Have you ever entered a crowded room and felt like no one was really there? If so, then you know what I'm talking about. And you understand why I chose this topic to share with you, because I believe it's time we reawaken a capacity that has been lost somewhere between notifications, brief calls, and polite smiles. That capacity is empathy. Before I go deeper into this journey, I want to ask you for something small. Yes, I know it might interrupt your flow, but if you've listened this far, I want to invite you to pause for just 5 seconds and leave a short comment below. I'm ready. Or simply, I'm here. Not for engagement, not for statistics, but because I want to know that someone is present with me, listening to this story, walking with me on a journey I've poured my heart into building. That short sentence is more than just words. It's your presence, and I don't take it for granted. It is a priceless joy. It is the reason I continue creating deeper, more sincere, more valuable content each day. So, if you do that, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you. Back to the story I'm sharing with you. In today's world, where everyone is being swept away by urgency, what makes you stand out is not how much you know, but how deeply you can feel. And the truth is, most people today are tired of pretending to be okay, tired of having to be productive all the time, tired because no one truly sees them. If you can be the person who makes others feel seen, heard, and understood, you will create an influence far more lasting than any title or tool could ever offer. You'll begin to see that people you once thought were distant start to soften when you truly listen to them. You'll see tense meetings become more effective when you can regulate both your emotions and others. You'll see new opportunities arise, not through competition, but through the trust others place in you, because they can sense your presence is real, grounded, and meaningful. And you'll come to realize something I've learned after years of listening and observing. People with high emotional intelligence don't need to be the best. They just need to be perceptive enough to know what others want, need, fear, and hope for. They're the ones who know when to offer encouragement and when to step back to create space for others to shine. They're the ones who can shift the energy in a room with just a glance or a well-timed silence. And you can become someone like that, not by becoming someone else, but by becoming a more connected, more attuned version of yourself. Emotional intelligence doesn't make you an idealized good person. It makes you truly powerful, because you understand how people operate, and you use that understanding not to manipulate, but to build, not to harm, but to heal, not to control, but to influence. In a world where people are racing to increase output, speed, and pressure, you'll be the one who chooses to increase depth. And if you're ready to go even deeper with me, to understand how to sense energy, read unspoken emotions, recognize subtle signals in communication, and use emotional intelligence to influence with authenticity, then I'll take you to the next part, where everything you've heard so far will begin to take shape as skills, behaviors, and internal strength. And you'll see more clearly than ever why the world may evolve, but the value of emotion, of connection, remains irreplaceable. Not by machines, not by algorithms, but only by you, a human being who knows how to listen, feel, and connect with a real heart. For years, the term emotional intelligence has been hailed as a vital skill of our time, especially as people face increasing pressure, change, and the fast pace of modern life. But here's a truth few people realize. Emotional intelligence, though essential, is not enough, because existing alongside it and playing an equally crucial role in your relationships, career, and life is social intelligence, a separate, uniquely profound capacity. Confusing the two is very common, and this confusion is often the reason many people feel lost in conversations, misunderstood in interactions, and unsuccessful in establishing personal influence. To understand the difference, you must first grasp this core principle. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and regulate your own internal emotions. Social intelligence is the ability to perceive, decode, and effectively interact with the emotions, behaviors, and motives of others within a social context. If emotional intelligence is your inner compass, helping you navigate your own emotions and remain steady in life's storms, then social intelligence is the detailed map for your journey alongside others, showing you when to step forward, when to hold back, when to remain silent so the other person can be heard, and when a timely word can unlock a door you thought was shut. Emotional intelligence builds the foundation for self-awareness, self-regulation, and healthy confidence. You know what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and how to respond deliberately instead of impulsively. But if you stop there, you may become good at living with yourself, yet not necessarily good at living with others. That's why social intelligence is the missing piece that allows you to step into the world with sensitivity, finesse, and real influence. Someone with high social intelligence doesn't have to speak a lot or perform impressively. Sometimes it's just the way they tilt their head when listening to someone speak. It's the subtle shift in their gaze when they notice someone hiding sadness. It's how they choose their words, adjust their tone, or remain silent at just the right moment, not to hurt, but to preserve honesty and care in communication. Social intelligence operates at a deep level where language is no longer enough to describe and emotion is no longer a personal affair. It becomes a dynamic flow between people. The important point here is this. Many people have emotional intelligence but lack social intelligence. They know when they're angry, they know how to stay calm, they can regulate their emotional state to avoid being dragged down by negativity. But when they step into a conversation, they don't know how to read others' body language. They miss the shift in energy when someone begins to withdraw. They don't know when to speak or when to just listen. And at times, they unintentionally hurt others without meaning to. That is the gap between personal emotional awareness and social sensitivity. A gap that, if unrecognized and untrained, can leave you as someone who is nice, but ineffective in creating meaningful influence. Social intelligence is the art of reading people, but not in a shallow or manipulative way. It is a refined understanding of human psychology, built on experience, observation, and the ability to navigate the energetic dynamics of every social setting. It helps you identify who's truly open, who's closed off, who's saying one thing but thinking another. It helps you choose the right moment to suggest, respond, or offer guidance. And more importantly, it allows you to build trust, that invisible currency that opens every door in both your personal and professional life. A leader with high social intelligence doesn't just give commands, they build relationships grounded in trust, empathy, and mutual respect. A sales professional with high social intelligence doesn't rely on aggressive techniques. They listen deeply enough to understand the unspoken needs of the customer. A life partner with social intelligence isn't just someone who always gets it right. They're someone who knows when to step back, when to ask, and when to simply hold your hand in silence. None of this comes from academic degrees, IQ, or speaking skills. It comes from the refinement of social intelligence. And here lies the core truth. Emotional intelligence is the root, social intelligence is the branches and leaves. Without roots, a tree cannot stand, but without leaves, it cannot breathe or grow into the world. You need both to become a whole, capable human being, one who understands themselves and connects deeply with others. When emotional intelligence helps you manage your anger, social intelligence turns that anger into a constructive conversation. When emotional intelligence helps you overcome the fear of rejection, social intelligence allows you to communicate with confidence and make others feel welcomed. And when both abilities work in harmony, you'll be able to step into any environment, whether a tense meeting or a room full of strangers, with steadiness, presence, and real influence. What matters most is this: both types of intelligence can be developed. They are not gifts for the lucky few. They are skills. They are processes. They are journeys you can walk every single day by observing more deeply, listening more attentively, sensing more precisely, and adjusting more subtly in every interaction. Every conversation is a chance to practice. Every response from another person is a signal guiding what to refine. Every time you notice a slight expression, a flicker in someone's eyes, or an uncomfortable silence, you are upgrading your social intelligence. And when you look back after a period of persistent training, you'll notice not only that you understand others better, but that others begin to understand and trust you more naturally than ever before. That is, when you no longer have to try to show up. Your very presence begins to speak for itself. And that is the moment when you truly enter a realm of capability no artificial intelligence can replace: the ability to connect deeply, genuinely, and sustainably from one human to another. Since the beginning of our existence as a primitive species, humans did not evolve to be alone. Unlike other creatures that survive on claws, speed, or predatory instincts, we evolved based on one extraordinary ability: connection. And this isn't just reflected in social behaviors. It is embedded deep within the architecture of the brain itself, in what modern science calls the social brain. This is not a poetic metaphor. It's the result of decades of neurological and evolutionary research, which shows that your brain was not only designed to think or memorize, but to feel others, to read the social environment, and to adapt itself to harmonize with the group. You were built to understand others, not just with logic, but through a sophisticated, innate system that operates constantly beneath the surface of consciousness. Take a simple example. When you see someone frown or tighten their lips, you don't need to analyze body language or read a psychology book to know they're stressed or angry. You feel it almost instantly. That's because your brain has a built-in network called the mirror system, which allows you to simulate another person's emotional state within your own body. When someone in front of you is in pain, a part of your brain reacts as though you're experiencing that pain yourself. When they feel joy, your brain releases dopamine and serotonin as if you were the one living that moment. This is not coincidence, it's evolution. A brain wired for empathy didn't just help individuals bond. It helped entire communities survive and thrive for thousands of generations. This explains why isolation has been one of the most severe punishments throughout human history, from banishment to remote islands to the silent exclusion of modern society that drives many into deep depression. When you're cut off, your brain actually sends pain signals similar to those from physical injury. Connection is not a luxury, it's a survival need. Your social brain won't let you ignore a sorrowful glance, a choking voice, or the lowered head of someone you care about. And that same brain won't let you feel calm in a room full of tension, even if no one speaks to you. No matter how modern your mind becomes, it is still constantly scanning for social cues, eye contact, tone of voice, pauses, gestures, to adjust how you feel and how you respond. That's why you can walk into a meeting and instantly sense who's leading, who's anxious, and who's silently resisting, without anyone saying a word. The bond between your brain and the social environment also reveals something powerful. Social intelligence is not something you merely learn, it is something you refine, because it already exists within you as a biological foundation. But like any natural ability, if it's not trained, it dulls over time. In a world where we interact more through screens, text instead of eye contact, video calls where cameras are off, our brain's capacity to feel others quietly deteriorates. We respond quickly to messages but fail to notice a subtle change in tone. We know how to use emojis to express feelings, yet we lose the ability to sense a sigh or a meaningful blink. And then we wonder why we feel lonely in a crowd, or why a conversation that seemed perfect leaves an empty feeling afterward. The answer lies in the fact that the social brain is being forgotten. An intriguing discovery in neuroscience reveals that the brain regions responsible for processing social cues, such as the medial prefrontal cortex, amygdala, and temporal lobes, are more active in people who maintain positive relationships and frequently engage in emotionally rich interactions. In other words, your social brain develops through real connection. not by studying theory. If you want to become more sensitive in reading others, understanding what's unsaid, and responding gracefully to unpredictable situations, you don't need to study more theory. You need to practice presence. Be fully present in every conversation. Observe not just words, but breath, expressions, and gaze. Listen not just with your ears, but with the stillness of your mind. That's how you activate and enrich the social brain that has always been there, waiting for you to awaken it. As you begin to observe others with deep attention and empathy, your brain naturally begins to record patterns. Patterns in behavior, responses, and emotional states. You don't need to rationally analyze them because your brain and body will start forming social intuition. You'll sense when someone is being defensive, even if they're smiling. You'll know when an apology is sincere and when it's just polite. You'll begin to perceive what others leave unsaid because you're using your entire social brain to feel. And that is where true influence begins, when you connect not just with words, but with emotional frequency, the deepest and most honest language of humanity. You don't need to become a psychologist. You don't need to learn how to manipulate behavior or memorize hundreds of communication rules. You only need to return to the instinct already within you, the instinct to connect. Your brain was designed to understand others, to respond with subtlety, to mirror emotion, to adjust behavior within a communal context. It is an evolutionary gift you've inherited. Don't abandon it. And when you once again trust in that ability, when you train it in every conversation, every interaction, every moment of true listening, you'll witness something extraordinary. You will no longer be the outsider, no longer trying to communicate, no longer striving to make an impression. You will become the person others trust, open up to, and want to be around. Because, quite simply, your social brain has been awakened. And that is a homecoming, not just to others, but to the deepest part of your own humanity. There is a kind of intelligence that cannot be measured by IQ, cannot be taught through dry theories, and cannot be faked if it does not truly exist within you. That is empathy, not vague sympathy, and certainly not sentimental pity. Empathy is a skill, a state, an emotional reflex, the ability to step into someone else's emotional space without losing yourself in the process. The ability to see the world through another person's eyes, to enter their inner world for a few moments. Not to fix, not to teach, but simply to be there with them, with a presence that is respectful and deeply human. We are living in a world full of voices, yet starving for listening. Everyone wants to be understood, but few are willing to pause and understand others. People are great at expressing what they think, but very few are sensitive enough to feel what others are not saying. And it is in that silent gap between spoken words and hidden emotions that empathy becomes the most essential bridge in every relationship, from work relationships and friendships to love and even the relationship with yourself. There are 3 depths of empathy. The first layer is cognitive empathy. When you understand what someone else is feeling, what they are going through from a logical and analytical standpoint, it's like seeing someone disappointed and knowing exactly why. But that's not enough. The second layer is emotional empathy. When you don't just understand but actually feel their emotion within your own body. You hear someone speak about their loss and your heart sinks with them. You see someone's tears and your throat tightens too. This isn't performance. This is your mirror neurons at work, reflecting another's true feelings like an emotional mirror. And finally, the third and deepest level is compassionate empathy, when you not only understand and feel, but are moved to take action for that person, not out of duty, not out of obligation, but because you want to lift up someone who is hurting, simply because you have been that person before, in pain, in loneliness, that no one else saw. Empathy does not make you weak. On the contrary, it is the highest expression of inner strength. Only when you are stable within can you open your heart to the world around you. Only when you feel safe inside can you enter someone else's wounded emotional space without being overwhelmed. Only when you are truly humble can you sit in silence and listen to someone in need without interrupting, without judging, without rushing to fix it? Because sometimes a deeply empathetic presence is more powerful than any advice. Empathy does not mean you agree. You don't have to believe someone else's feelings are right. You just have to accept that those feelings are real to them. You don't need to understand the entire journey of someone's life to walk beside them in this one moment. You just need to be there, fully, honestly, and humanely. No performing, no distractions, no comparisons. Just listening with your whole heart. In work environments, those with empathy are often the ones most trusted, respected, and influential. They're not always the loudest in the room, but they are the ones people turn to when things go wrong, because they make others feel safe. In families, empathetic people know how to listen to an angry child instead of labeling them unreasonable. They understand that behind the screaming is fear of abandonment, and behind the silence are unspoken emotions. In love, empathy is what allows you to love someone not for an ideal version of them, but for their true self, with all their flaws, wounds, and shadows that they might not share with anyone else. And in your relationship with yourself, empathy is how you stop criticizing, stop overburdening, stop running from your feelings. It's when you learn to say to yourself, I understand, I'm tired, and that's okay. I'm doing the best I can. The beautiful thing is this: empathy is not a talent you're born with, it's a skill you can practice. Starting from the smallest things, when you pay attention to someone's facial expression instead of just listening to their words. When you ask, how do you feel, instead of, why did you do that? When you train yourself to stay still and listen all the way through, instead of reacting or rushing to offer advice. When you begin to recognize that everyone is fighting an invisible battle, and you may be the first person to offer them a place to lean on, simply through a look of understanding. To practice empathy daily, you don't have to completely change who you are. You just need to begin with presence. Put down your devices, your judgments, your need to sound clever. Just sit down and really listen. And if you don't understand, ask. Not to challenge, but to understand better. If you don't know what to say, admit it. Because sometimes saying, I don't know what to say, but I'm here with you, is exactly what someone needs most. Empathy never goes out of style. In a world increasingly divided by differences, what will connect us again is not reason, but empathy. When you understand someone on an emotional level, you no longer see them as the other. You see them as part of yourself. And when empathy becomes your way of living, you won't just improve your communication, your work, or your love life, and you'll become a fuller version of what it means to be human. Strong and gentle, rational and compassionate, bold in action yet tender in heart. That's not weakness, that is the height of true strength. Have you ever felt that someone said all the right things and yet you still couldn't trust them? Have you ever been in a situation where someone says they're fine, but their eyes, their voice, their posture tell an entirely different story? That's not a coincidence. That's the moment when nonverbal communication speaks far louder than any words you may hear. The truth is, spoken language makes up only a tiny portion of how we actually communicate. A famous study in communication psychology revealed that while verbal language conveys only about 7% of emotional impact, the tone of voice, its rhythm, volume, and inflection, accounts for 38%, and the remaining 55% comes from body language, eye contact, gestures, facial expressions, posture, physical distance between people. In other words, the majority of what we feel from another person comes from what they don't say. And that is precisely why some people can speak very little yet still command the attention of an entire room. Why some individuals earn instant trust, understanding, or on the contrary, create unease, just through a single glance. Nonverbal communication isn't something you can fake for long. It reveals true emotions, real states of mind, and sometimes even the most hidden intentions, regardless of how carefully someone crafts their words. To understand someone on a deeper level, you need to learn to listen with your eyes, feel with your intuition, and respond not just with words. Every small action, every subtle movement carries meaning. When someone leans in toward you, it shows engagement. When they keep glancing away while you're sharing something important, it might signal tension or discomfort. When their hands clench, their breathing quickens, and their body folds inward, it's a sign of defensiveness, of anxiety quietly pulsing beneath the surface. However, nonverbal communication should not be decoded rigidly. Someone crossing their arms isn't always being defensive. Perhaps that's just how they feel comfortable. Someone avoiding eye contact isn't necessarily lying. They may simply be shy. Or from a culture where direct eye contact is considered impolite. That's why you must develop what's called contextual sensitivity, the ability to interpret nonverbal signals, not just by the signal itself, but by taking into account the situation, the environment, and the unique traits of the person in front of you. The key isn't memorizing hundreds of expressions or gestures like a psychology textbook. The key is refining your ability to observe carefully and without judgment. When you pay attention to breathing rhythms, blink frequency, vocal tremors, or the precise moment someone suddenly goes quiet, you're tuning into emotional layers that haven't been voiced. And when you respond in harmony, lowering your voice when someone is anxious, adjusting your distance when they step back, you're communicating on a deeper plane, the plane of trust. One crucial skill in nonverbal communication is attunement, the ability to adjust your presence to resonate with the emotional state and energy of the other person. When someone is grieving, you don't need to say much. Sometimes a compassionate look, a slow nod, or full silent presence is all it takes for them to feel understood. On the other hand, when someone is excited, you can join their energy through a bright smile, a spark in your eyes, or a slight forward lean. In both cases, you're not pretending to empathize, you're allowing your body to become a finely tuned mirror. And that creates connection far beyond words. But remember, effective nonverbal communication starts within. A tense person cannot make others feel safe. Someone who is rushed, distracted, or full of inner judgment cannot create the kind of presence that opens hearts. That's why mastering nonverbal communication isn't just about observing others, it's also about observing yourself. Is your posture open or closed? Is your voice hurried or gentle? Does your face show warmth or cold detachment? Does your body give the other person permission to be fully themselves? When you train yourself to become a refined nonverbal communicator, you not only understand others more quickly, you help them understand themselves. Because there are feelings and states people themselves haven't even named until they encounter someone perceptive enough to see them and reflect them back. Nonverbal communication is the core skill behind every lasting relationship. It's the foundation of trust. It's the silent space where truth rises without needing to be spoken. It's the kind of presence that makes another person feel, I am seen, I am understood, I am accepted. And in a world increasingly filled with noise and excess information, those who know how to stay silent at the right time, see deeply in the right place, and be present in the right way are the ones who hold the most profound kind of power. There is a moment you will always remember clearly in any confrontation, conflict, or high-pressure situation. It's the moment you're forced to choose whether to react impulsively from emotion or to pause and ask yourself, how can I respond in a way that doesn't destroy everything? What makes someone trusted, admired, and deeply influential isn't that they never get angry, anxious, or afraid. It's that they know how not to be led by those emotions. When others lose control, when words turn sharp, when the atmosphere thickens with suppressed emotions, that is precisely when you must be more in control of yourself than ever. Emotional regulation is not about suppressing emotions, nor is it about pretending to be calm in a fake, disconnected way. It's the elevated art of recognizing your emotions earlier, faster, and more intentionally so that you choose your response instead of letting your emotions choose for you. The human brain is hardwired for survival. The fight, flight, or freeze reflexes are primitive strategies controlled by the limbic system, especially the amygdala, when it senses danger. And in a heated conversation, your brain often doesn't distinguish between a life-threatening situation and a tense disagreement. That's why your heart races, your throat tightens, your fists clench, and your mind goes blurry, all from a sentence that feels like an attack. These responses are real, but you don't have to be a prisoner to them. The skill of emotional regulation starts with recognizing your emotional triggers, those words, tones, looks, or behaviors that tend to throw you off balance. When you clearly know what your emotional weak spots are, you're no longer surprised when they show up. And you don't let them silently dictate your behavior. For example, if you often react strongly when you feel disrespected, you can prepare in advance with a deep breath, a neutral question, or an inner reminder like, keeping my integrity matters more than retaliating. In high-stress moments, those with high social intelligence always create an inner pause, a split second, just a few seconds, where they breathe, mentally step back, and ask, what response will actually improve this situation? That pause is where you shift from instinct to intention. It's the moment you stop being the victim of emotion and start being the navigator of the exchange. Regulating your emotions effectively not only brings peace to yourself, it creates a stable emotional field for others. When you don't react aggressively, when your voice remains steady and your gaze calm, the other person, no matter how tense, can begin to feel safe. And within that safety, they are far more likely to open up, to listen, to soften. This is especially powerful in moments of negotiation, difficult feedback, or when delivering hard truths to loved ones, colleagues, or subordinates. But sometimes, emotional regulation isn't just about saving the external moment. It's about protecting your inner world. Some people simply don't know how to manage their own emotions, and they'll throw them at you. Some will use words as weapons. There will be situations that hurt you simply because you chose to show up authentically. In those moments, you must know how to manage your emotions, not to please others, but to not allow others to pull you away from your best self. One of the most powerful strategies for emotional regulation is inner training through mindfulness. Mindfulness is not just meditation, it's full presence in each moment. It's the ability to notice an emotion rising without immediately clinging to it. It's the ability to observe yourself like a kind friend and remind yourself, every emotion is just a guest. Let it come and let it go. When you master this, you stop being a victim to anger, anxiety, or hurt. You become the one who manages emotion, the one who creates space for dialogue rather than fueling the fire. Emotional regulation is also one of the defining traits of true leadership. A leader isn't someone who commands well, but someone who creates emotional stability for the whole team. They don't let temporary feelings shape long-term decisions. They don't respond out of personal pain, but reply from a place rooted in a greater mission. And it's that calm amid the storm that draws others in, earns trust, and inspires growth. On a deeper level, emotional regulation is an act of self-respect, because every time you preserve your character, every time you stay centered in adversity, you're sending a message to yourself. I'm strong enough not to be ruled by someone else's emotions. I am worthy enough that I don't need to react to prove anything. I'm mature enough to know that inner peace is more valuable than outer victory. And that is a strength no one can take from you. What's beautiful is this: emotional regulation is not an innate trait, it's a skill you can train. With every conversation, every time you choose to pause instead of react, every time you place a hand over your heart instead of balling it into a fist, every time you take a deep breath instead of raising your voice, you are building an invisible yet incredibly valuable power. Mastery over yourself in a world where others are constantly losing theirs. And when you can do that, you don't just change the outcome of one conversation, you change how the world responds to you. You elevate your presence, you inspire. Without shouting, you lead without forcing. And you become the person others turn to, not because you're perfect, but because you're steady. You don't avoid emotion, you simply don't let it control you. And that is the true strength of someone with social intelligence. There is a rare ability that once you possess it, you no longer need to say too much, be the most skilled person in the room, or try to impress anyone. It is the ability to respond accurately to emotions, a soft yet sharp form of intelligence that makes others not only want to hear you, but trust you, follow you, and give you their confidence effortlessly. The world is not short on people with ideas, energy, or a desire to show off. What it lacks is people with enough sensitivity to understand what the other person truly needs and respond just enough at the right time in a profoundly human way. When you respond to others' emotions with precision, you don't just make them feel understood. You lower their defenses, soothe tense emotional states, and open a door where connection, collaboration, and transformation can truly happen. This isn't about being nice, nor is it about manipulation. It's how you become someone who influences deeply and sustainably, not by controlling, but through presence that feels and thinks. Responding to emotion is not about giving advice. It's not a reflex to fix the issue. It's the capacity to be truly present inside someone else's emotional world, even if just for a moment, so that your response isn't a solution but a form of empathy, acknowledgement, or the creation of space for them to simply be. When someone shares disappointment, they may not need you to show them the next step. Maybe all they need is for you to say, "I hear you. That must have been really hard." When someone expresses anxiety, they might not be asking you to eliminate the fear. What they might truly need is to feel that you're there without judgment, without dramatizing, so they don't feel alone. Accurate emotional response requires you to set aside your ego, your need to be clever, and your impulse to jump in and fix. Because most of us were trained to think logically, but very few of us were taught how to be present with emotion. We were trained to argue quickly, but rarely guided on how to respond gently. In a world where everyone is rushing to speak, the one who can pause, listen deeply, and match the emotional rhythm of the other wins the heart. And when you touch someone's emotion without hurting or judging them, you gain the power to influence their beliefs, their behaviors, and their willingness to engage. So how do you do that? First, you need to read the emotional map unfolding in the conversation. Pay attention not just to the words, but to their expression, their eyes, their posture, the way their voice changes when certain topics arise. Emotions aren't always obvious, but they always leave clues. If someone suddenly falls silent, ask yourself, are they feeling ignored? If someone repeats what they've just said, maybe they're seeking validation. And when someone shares an overload of details, perhaps they're not looking for a solution, but for someone patient enough to stay, not withdraw under pressure. Next, adjust your response to match the emotional state of the person in front of you. This is a balancing act between softness and assertiveness, between attunement and guidance. If someone is extremely tense, a slow, gentle tone and a steady voice may be what they need to breathe and feel safe again. But if they're spiraling into negativity, too soft a response might make them feel you don't get it. In that case, a firm, grounded statement, strong yet non-threatening, can help pull them back to center. Accurate emotional response also means you have to work constantly on yourself so that others' emotions don't spill into and override yours. There will be moments when you hear hard things. Times when people unload frustrations that aren't yours. And yes, there will be people who manipulate emotions to make you feel guilty or responsible for something you didn't cause. In those moments, you must stand firm in honesty without being harsh. Be clear without being cold. Stay open without losing your boundaries. Why is this so important? Because every meaningful relationship, every real influence, begins with the feeling, I am understood. Once someone feels you understand them, not just logically, but emotionally, they'll listen to you, consider your words, and choose to shift, not because they're forced, but because they feel seen. This is the power of subtle influence. It doesn't come from pressure, but from resonance. And when you're someone who consistently responds in tune with others' emotions, people will gravitate toward you not because you're always right, but because you're human, trustworthy, and make them feel like they can be themselves around you. Ultimately, the ability to respond accurately to emotions is a lifelong practice. Every conversation is an opportunity to retrain your responses less from instinct, more from understanding. You won't always get it right. There will be times you miss the mark. But if you show up honestly, gently, and fully present, the person across from you will feel it. And that is what builds attraction, connection, and influence without the need to perform. Because in a world full of noise, the one who makes others feel understood is the one the world leans in to hear. No one likes conflict. No one wants to be in tense situations, to face feelings of being misunderstood, hurt, or attacked. But the truth is, there is no relationship deep enough that hasn't passed through conflict. The issue is not whether conflict happens, it's how you face it, how you handle it. And most importantly, whether you're willing to go all the way to the truth. Because every lasting connection is built on the foundation of sincerity. If there's no place for truth, the relationship exists only on the surface. It might flow smoothly for a while, but it will eventually break under the weight of everything that was never said. Conflict, when approached correctly, is not a threat. It is a valuable opportunity for a relationship to grow. It's when two worlds collide, not to eliminate one another, but to illuminate each other. It is the point where differences force us to ask, have I really listened? Am I misunderstanding something? Have I unintentionally hurt the other person by what I didn't say? Am I willing to enter a conversation not to win, but to understand? But to do this, you must shed the adversarial mindset, the idea that one person has to be right and the other wrong. Conflict shouldn't be seen as a battle. It is a signal. An invitation for you to listen more deeply, to look more closely, and to ask, not to argue, but to uncover what hasn't been spoken. The unfortunate truth is, most of us enter difficult conversations either with avoidance or aggression. We either stay silent and carry silent wounds, or we react strongly to protect our ego, leading to power struggles and collapse. But there is a third path, the path of conscious presence, where you prepare not just your words, but your mindset. Before entering a difficult conversation, ask yourself, what do I really want to happen? Am I trying to prove something, or am I trying to understand something more? Do I want to win, or do I want to connect? And if I'm the one initiating the conversation, am I speaking from a genuine need to connect, or from a fear of being abandoned, misunderstood, or losing control? Because if you're unclear about what you want, you'll easily be swept up in emotion, and when emotion speaks too loudly, reason has no room to intervene. You must also prepare how you communicate the truth, because truth, if delivered at the wrong time, in the wrong tone, or in the wrong space, can become a blade. Remember, how you say something can matter just as much as what you say. A truth spoken with contempt, anger, or attack is no longer liberating. It becomes a blow. On the other hand, a truth shared with calmness, with a desire to heal, with a generous perspective, can open the door to deep dialogue without anyone feeling the need to defend. The key skill in transforming conflict is listening. Not to counter, but to truly understand what the other person is feeling. When you listen without cutting in, without preparing your next response in your head, you send a powerful message. I am here with you. I'm not just hearing what you say. I hear what you're living with. And when someone feels deeply heard, they no longer need to shout. They no longer need to guard themselves. They begin to settle. And that's when the real conversation begins. Of course, not every conflict can be easily resolved. There are value differences, old wounds, and pain that can't be healed with a simple apology. But even when you can't agree, you can still show respect. You can still remain calm and choose not to cause further harm, and sometimes just choosing to walk away, not in anger, but in clarity, is enough to preserve a relationship's dignity. even if it can no longer remain close. There's something I want you to remember. Conflict does not destroy a relationship. It's how we avoid or distort the truth that ruins it. If you have someone brave enough to enter conflict with you honestly, be grateful, because they believe the relationship is worth preserving, not through false harmony, but through truth. And you, if you want to be someone with true social intelligence, you need more than the ability to please others. You need the ability to speak the truth without making others feel attacked. You need to practice holding space for difficult emotions. Not shrinking when someone shows anger or pain, but standing steady and receiving it as part of the relationship's growth. This is not a surface-level communication technique. It is the maturity of emotional adulthood. Each time you walk through conflict without leaving ashes behind, you elevate that relationship to a new level. And each time you speak the truth without breaking the connection, you become a person of true influence. Not through force, but through integrity. Because in the end, people don't remember what clever thing you said. They remember how real you were. There is a kind of influence more powerful than authority, more lasting than promises, and more deeply resonant than even the most sophisticated manipulation techniques. And that is influence born from truth. Not truth delivered with arrogance or hidden beneath flowery language, but truth that stands transparent, humble, and consistent in your actions, your choices, and the way you live. Real influence doesn't come from forcing others to change. It comes from you becoming a living embodiment of what you speak. People don't change when they're cornered. They change when something in you makes them feel, I want to live like that too. Influence is not domination. It's not about speaking louder, more frequently, or more sharply than others. Influence doesn't need to shout. It simply stands firm, whole, and consistent until others can't help but listen. When someone senses that you are not trying to change them, but instead understand them, not trying to control them, but creating space for them to choose, they begin to open up. And when they open up, they begin to listen with their heart, not just their ears. Many people think that to be influential, they must learn to speak well, polish their image, or persuade with sharp logic. But you know what truly makes you deeply influential? It's something no one can teach you. The alignment between what you believe, what you say, and what you do. When others feel that you live what you speak, without performance, without embellishment, your words carry weight. They don't need to be emphasized. They don't need to be justified. They only need to appear, and people will feel them. The truth is, in a world flooded with information, people aren't lacking advice, they're lacking trust. And trust isn't built from titles, credentials, or how many followers you have online. Trust comes from something simple, the feeling, I know this person is speaking truth. I know this person is living truth. And that feeling is the foundation of influence. Without it, every persuasion technique becomes a coat of paint that peels away easily. When you want to influence someone, instead of asking, how do I get them to listen to me, ask, have I truly seen them? Because influence doesn't begin with what you say. It begins when someone feels seen, understood, and respected. People don't change because you're right. They change when they feel you care enough to understand why they're not ready to change yet. When you stop pushing, you begin to invite. When you stop proving, you begin to connect. And it is that connection where influence is born. There's something paradoxical about influence. The more you need others to follow you, the less influence you have. But when you let go of the desire to control and focus instead on showing up clearly, sincerely, and consistently, you become someone people naturally trust. It's not persuasion by technique, it's the magnetism of authenticity. Influence through truth is not a journey to change others. It's the journey of living in alignment with yourself so fully that your presence awakens something in others. Sometimes all it takes is a simple sentence, a small action, or even a well-timed silence to ignite transformation. Because truth doesn't need to be loud, but once it appears, it makes all falsehoods unmistakably visible. This requires courage. Courage not to please, courage not to say what people want to hear, but to say what needs to be heard. It demands emotional mastery, to respond without reacting, to hold space without controlling, to simply be there, steady, calm, and in integrity. And sometimes it is your very integrity that makes others stop and reflect. You don't need to win every argument to be influential. You only need to be someone others can trust. And trust is not built in a single conversation. It is built in every moment you choose to keep your word, to stay honest even if misunderstood, to stay silent when anger rises, and to remain patient when no one is listening. It's these small choices that define your true influence. And when you start living this way, you don't need to chase crowds to be heard. You don't need to shout to be seen. You don't need gimmicks to be powerful, because then your mere presence becomes a shift. People will quietly wonder, why do I want to listen to someone who's not trying to convince me? And the answer lies in the truth. You're living, not loud but clear, not flashy but compelling, not trying to stand out but impossible to ignore. There's something quietly powerful that I believe you've felt too. Sometimes we don't clearly remember what someone said to us, but we always remember how they made us feel. That is the mark of empathy, a form of intelligence that cannot be seen but is always felt. When someone truly understands and responds to what you feel deep inside, you want to stay, not because they're better or more right, but because you feel heard, seen, and accepted exactly as you are. In a world full of comparison, rush, and impatience, what makes people want to stay isn't talent or status. It's the sense of emotional safety they feel in the presence of someone empathetic. Empathy is not when you say, I understand. It's when someone genuinely feels understood. It's not in the words, it's in your presence, in your ability to listen without interrupting, in the non-judgmental look in your eyes, in the gentle nod that tells someone without a doubt, you're not alone. When you have the ability to step into someone else's emotional space, you step out of your world and into theirs. And that creates a bond that is invisible but deeply lasting. You see, in every conversation, there are always two layers happening at once. The verbal layer, what is being said, and the emotional layer, what is actually being felt. Someone with high social intelligence doesn't just listen to the words, they listen to the feelings beneath the words, because not everyone can articulate how they feel. Sometimes they use humor to cover up hurt. Sometimes they use anger to mask fear. And if you only respond to behavior, it's easy to judge. But if you can see the core emotion, you'll know how to connect. Empathy doesn't require you to be like the other person. It only requires that you're willing to step outside of your own mental framework. Empathy is when you stop thinking, what will I say next? And start asking, what is this person truly feeling right now? And when you ask that question sincerely, you open the door to a deeper kind of relationship, because people aren't looking for someone who understands all their problems. They're looking for someone who understands the feeling behind the problem. When you can reach that, you're not just a conversational partner, you become someone they trust. A friend once asked me, how do I hold on to someone I love? I didn't answer with a strategy. I simply said, be the person they feel safe opening up to, because where there's safety, there's commitment. And the deepest safety doesn't come from promises. It comes from non-judgmental presence, free of manipulation or demands. The kind of presence that says, whether I'm joyful or broken, strong or vulnerable, I'm still accepted here. Empathy doesn't mean always agreeing. You can disagree with someone's viewpoint and still empathize with the emotion they're going through. This is a critical skill, the ability to separate opinion from emotion. Because if you only respond to content, you fall into debate. But if you respond to feeling, you create connection. For example, if someone says something that surprises or upsets you, instead of rushing to correct them, try saying, I can see this really matters to you. That statement doesn't affirm or deny anything, but it opens space for continued dialogue and mutual understanding. Empathy is also a kind of courage, the courage to admit you might not always be right, The courage to stop reacting and stay with someone else's feelings a little longer. The courage to enter another person's wounded space, not to fix, but simply to be there. And sometimes that presence alone is healing. Some wounds don't need advice, they just need someone who's willing to listen. You'd be surprised to learn how many conflicts, misunderstandings, and emotional injuries don't stem from anything major, but simply because someone didn't feel understood. A simple "I'm sorry" might not be enough, but a look that truly carries remorse can soften an entire storm. A small gesture, like asking, "Are you okay?" at the right time, can make someone feel more loved than 1,000 eloquent words. So if you genuinely want to build lasting relationships, you don't need to be more impressive, you just need to be more empathetic. And finally, remember this: empathy isn't only for others. It must also be directed inward. You can't give what you don't have. If you've never been gentle with yourself, it's hard to be gentle with others. If you've always forced yourself to be strong, it's hard to accept vulnerability in someone else. So begin by being empathetic toward yourself, toward the pain you've hidden, the mistakes you feared, the imperfect parts of yourself you once tried to deny. When you know how to empathize with yourself, you become a place others want to return to. And when you become a place others want to return to, you don't have to cling to them. They stay. Because in you, they've found what we're all quietly searching for: the feeling of being seen and loved. Before we end this journey, there's one thing I want you to remember. Everything you've just learned is trainable. These are not inborn traits. They're not exclusive gifts handed to a select few. Every single skill, from reading others' emotions to understanding your own reactions, managing your responses, and mastering the art of influence, is something you can build. And the best part is, you don't have to wait for some perfect timing in the future. You can begin today, right now, in the smallest interactions of your day, with a loved one, a colleague, or even a stranger. You already have the opportunity to practice. You might not get it right. You might still react impulsively the first time, forget to observe someone's facial expression, or say the wrong thing because you weren't mindful enough. That's okay, because transformation doesn't happen by being perfect from the start. It happens because you're willing to keep going, to relearn, to try again with a different mindset. You don't need a long course to learn how to listen. You just need to silence the noise in your head, set aside your judgments, look at the person in front of you and genuinely want to understand. You don't need complex techniques to empathize. You only need to ask, can I feel what they're going through right now? You don't need to be naturally gifted to master nonverbal communication. You just need to pay attention. Is their body open or closed? Is their voice steady or trembling? Are their eyes seeking connection or avoiding pain? All of this isn't some far-off concept. It's right here, within your capacity to observe and practice every single day. And if you feel overwhelmed by the number of skills you think you need to develop, breathe. True growth never comes from trying to master everything at once. It comes from choosing one small thing, sticking with it, and practicing it until it becomes a part of you. Today, you might choose just one thing. For example, instead of reacting when someone criticizes you, you pause for 3 seconds, take a breath, and say, can you share how that's affecting you? That one action, repeated, can slowly shape an entirely new version of you. Calmer, wiser, more connected, and deeply influential. Don't underestimate your small victories along the way. That one time you managed to hold back a sharp reaction, that one time you asked a deeper question instead of pretending to understand, that one time you noticed someone's sadness even though they said nothing. Every one of those moments is a brick laid in the foundation of your socially intelligent self. And as you keep practicing, you'll begin to notice subtle shifts all around you. Conversations become easier. Tensions dissolve. Relationships grow deeper. And most importantly, you begin to feel a new belief solidifying, that you can navigate the human world with sensitivity, intelligence, and compassion. I know that sometimes you'll slip back into old patterns. There will be days you feel frustrated because you lost control again or missed an opportunity to connect. But please, don't let that convince you you're not cut out for this. Look at this instead if you've made it to the end of this message. It means you've taken yourself seriously. It means you've made a commitment to your own growth, and that alone puts you ahead of many who merely skim through life without ever pausing to observe or change. No one can walk this path for you, but I promise you are not alone. Because every time you choose to respond rather than react, you're helping create a more thoughtful world. Every time you observe someone without judgment, you're creating a safe space for them to be real. Every time you choose sincerity over pretense, you inspire others to live more honestly too. And through these small, repeated choices, you're not just practicing a skill, you're becoming someone with real, lasting influence. And if today you need a specific starting point, here's one. Choose a conversation you're going to have, maybe with someone you've been avoiding or someone you usually only connect with on a surface level. In that conversation, just listen a little deeper. Observe a little more closely. Respond a little more gently. And afterward, ask yourself, what shift did I create in that person's emotional state? That's the most honest form of practice you can do. You don't need to be a psychologist. You don't need to be a communication expert. You just need to be a human being willing to observe, feel, and connect sincerely. And the beautiful part is just by starting today, you've already stepped into a journey of deep transformation without needing any perfect condition at all. So I want to end this journey with one final question. If you knew for certain that with consistent practice, you could become someone everyone trusts, listens to, and respects, would you be willing to start? If your answer is yes, then welcome to the world of those who don't live by instinct alone, but by intelligence and awareness. Those who don't just connect, but create connection. Who aren't just listened to, but make others want to listen. And if you keep going, I promise, you'll become one of them, not by luck, but by practice, starting today.